Okay, we will just pick up where we left off yesterday. So, should be right here. You guys can actually follow along. We're on page 113. Okay, so we talked about long, short, flat bones. Typically, the flat bones, I think that's kind of where we were. They're thin, they're usually curved. They also usually have a little bit of cortical tissue around the outside, but they're trabecular in the middle. And then last one on here is irregular, and these are just all of your irregularly shaped bones. So the vertebrae that's in the spine, those are irregular bones. Some of the facial bones are irregular, and then the hip, like the pelvic bones, those are considered irregular bones. So, and one thing on long bones, I didn't say this, but your long bones also include like your fingers and all the bones that are in your fingers. Even though they're short, technically, I mean, we think of them as short, they're still longer than they are wide. So just FYI on that. Okay, anatomical structure of the long bones. Okay, so this is a good picture. Coincides with the picture if you want to follow along on 114. You can see it a little bit better. So it has two basic parts. All of the long bones do. They have what's called the diaphysis. This is kind of the long shaft portion, the central portion of a long bone. That's called the diaphysis. And I just think dia is complete. I don't know, for some reason that helps me remember. Anyways, and then the ends of long bones are called epiphyses or an epiphysis. And remember, epi means above or towards the outer surface. So that's how you can remember epiphysis are on the outside, diaphysis is in the middle. Okay, so the diaphysis is typically cortical bone, so that's the really dense, strong bone, and it's covered by what's called the periosteum, Periosteum. And you can see that on here too. I know you can't read it in your picture on your PowerPoint, but you can follow along on 114. You can see the periosteum. Peri means around, so the periosteum is just the outer layer of bone, and we see that wraps around the diaphysis. Also, in the diaphysis, we have the medullary cavity. Anytime you see medulla, okay, that is just the central portion. So this, inside the medullary cavity, we have what's called the endosteum. Okay, sounds kind of like periosteum, but periosteum is outside, it's around. Endosteum has endo at the beginning, so it's inside. This is the inner layer. Okay. And then these typically have yellow marrow on the inside. Okay, now yellow marrow, and you need to write this down too. Yellow marrow is really just fat storage. So stores fat on the inside. Okay. So we find that inside the middle section of long bones. Okay, then we have the epiphysis. Like we said, it's on either end, right, of the bone. And look, notice that this one we have articular cartilage covers the ends of these. Remember, that's that really smooth, glassy cartilage, that hyaline cartilage. So articular just means like that's where it moves. Articulate is like movement. So in the epiphysis, the ends of the long bones, we see a different type of bone. Cortical is around the outside, but the middle part of the bone is trabecular. So it's that spongy type of bone. And that's also where we see the red marrow. Okay. Now, red marrow is different than yellow marrow in that that's where we see blood cell formation. Okay, so hematopoiesis, that's where that takes place. And so we see a lot of red bone marrow in our flat bones and short bones because those are mostly trabecular. The vertebrae, again, trabecular, the sternum, flat bones, ribs, and then the ends of the long bones like we see here. So we've got spongy tissue here. This is cortical tissue. It's really solid and strong, and then it has that medullary cavity in the middle. Okay, but red bone marrow we would find in the ends of the long bones. Okay, and again, these are the ones that are usually covered by that cartilage. Okay, anatomical structure of the long bones. Now, if you'll remember, we talked about bone being connective tissue. So we know that connective tissue has a matrix, and it does, okay? There's osteocytes, and then these areas that surround it, you'll see here, are considered the matrix. So if you look like at this picture up here on the top right, that's also 115 in your book. You have the osteocytes, these cells that are kind of in these little canals in here. And then you have this lamellae, okay, that's in the middle. That's really considered the matrix part of it. Okay, key thing here are is that we have haversian canals. Okay, and these run vertically, if you will. They kind of run the lengthwise of the bone. I guess they don't always run vertically, but they run lengthwise, and then they actually hold blood vessels. So bone is well vascularized. It has lots of blood running to it. It holds lymph vessels and so forth. Actually want to read a little section out of the book here with you guys. Look at, it starts at the bottom of page 114 where it says, how does living bone? And then we'll read through to the end of this little section. So I want everybody to follow along, page 114. It says, how does living bone receive nourishment and get rid of waste products? Bone has what you might think of as its own subway system. An intricate array of passageways exists at a microscopic level inside the mineralized part of bone. Blood vessels and nerves course through these tiny vessels. Major passageways running in a lengthwise direction through the bone are called haversian canals. Tiny cavities called lacunae are laid out in concentric circles called lamellae. Around these haversian canals, and it's the lacunae that provide homes for the osteocytes. So like I said, matrix kind of provides a home for its cells. So when you look at this, kind of pulls it out here, you've got this haversian system. It's called an osteon. Okay, and it wraps around this blood vessel, and it's just kind of a cylindrical little organ, if you will. And then it's pulled out right here, and you can see how it's sectioned. So it's got osteocytes all around it, and then it's got lamellae, which is kind of that tissue in between, and then the lacuna, or the lacunae, are the cavities. Whenever you see that word cavity, that's just an opening. So that's just kind of like the little space for the osteocyte, or that bone cell. That's the space that it's talking about, is what's called a lacuna. Each haversian canal with its surrounding layers of lacunae forms a structural unit called an osteon, or a haversian system. Within these systems, there are tiny sideways canals called canaliculi. The canaliculi connect with the lacunae, forming a comprehensive transportation matrix for supply of nutrients and then removal of waste products. So as the multiple haversian systems are joined by perforating canals, or Volkmann's canals, that run sideways. So look at these, you can kind of see, if you look at this picture, okay, these haversian canals run lengthwise in the bone, and then you've got these little Volkmann's canals, or perforating canals, that run side to side. And they just all feed, blood, oxygen, nutrients, and so forth. So that's what bone, if you take it out, I've got a microscope slide, and I'll put it on the microscope for you guys. I want you guys, before you leave today, to look at it. I'll put it on the big microscope. So I want you guys to actually take a look at that. Okay, let's keep going for a minute. Almost done here. Okay, growth and development of bones. So these are a couple different types of other bone cells that we have. We have osteoblasts, okay, and this is a specific type of cell that actually builds bone tissue. So blast and build, blast and build, blast, build. Osteoblasts build bone, okay? Osteoclasts are the type of cells that actually break down bone. So one thing that said in the book was you could remember this by blast is build, clast is clear. Clast clears, bone, blast builds, clast clears. So it breaks down bone tissue. Now why do you think we would need to break down bone tissue? Okay. It's because our bones, remember, store phosphorus and store calcium. So when our calcium levels in our blood get too low, then it sends a message. Actually, it has to do with the thyroid and parathyroid glands. And they actually send messages to these osteoclasts that will break down bone so that calcium can be released into the bloodstream. If we've got too much calcium in our bloodstream, then osteoblasts will take that calcium and build bone tissue. Pretty crazy. So that's how we stay in homeostasis, because those two cells function and work together, those two types of cells. And in adulthood, we see that these are balanced. Now for kids, they're constantly growing, building up tissue and so forth. So their osteoblasts are generally going to outnumber their osteoclasts. And then bone formation is called ossification. And whenever you hear that word, it's like a hardening, kind of makes you think of fossil, you know. Ossification is just the hardening of that. So in an embryo, actually, all of our bone starts out as cartilage. And when we're still in the mother's womb, then bones actually cover that cartilage. Bones kind of is built around that. And then the cartilage dissipates, and that's what actually creates that medullary cavity. Kind of interesting. Pretty interesting. Okay, growth and development of bones. We have longitudinal growth. That's like growing height, okay, so lengthwise. We have what's called an epiphyseal plate. So look real quick. Let's see. Oh, I have a great picture in here. Well, you can see it. At the bottom of 116, you can kind of see this picture. You can see this epiphyseal plate. At the ends of the long bones, we have epiphyseal plates. And whenever you look at them on an x-ray, actually, let me show you guys. Hold on. Hold on, let me figure out how to show it to you. Okay, well, maybe not. Plate. I want to show you guys an x-ray. We can actually see these a little bit better. Any of these will work. Hold on, I know you guys can't see it. Oh, here we go. Okay, now I think you guys can see it, hopefully. So, okay, so here's a really good picture, and you can see it in here. It's just harder to tell what it is. Okay, so this to me looks, there's a fibula, tibia. So this is the, it should be the knee. So the end of the long bones, you can see this. Here's the tibia. So it's like the femur here. And this little line right here, it looks like there's a blank space and those bones are separate. That's actually the epiphyseal plate. We also refer to the epiphyseal plate as the growth plate. Okay, so those are the same thing. Epiphyseal plate and growth plate are the same thing. So you can see right here, that line in there. Now, the older people get, you know, there's always a remnant of that line, like there'll always be kind of a little dark place, but it will close. You know, when growth stops, it closes. Okay, trying to see if there's anything else. Okay, you can see it really good here. You can see the kneecap on the other side. This is kind of, I guess this is from the back of the knee. This one, you can kind of see a remnant right here. Here's an ankle bone, it looks like. So here you can see the plate. So that's what those lines are. That's the epiphyseal plate. It looks like a little blank spot. And basically it's growing both directions from there. It's really interesting to look at growth plates in the hands. That's not really what I wanted, was it? Let's see. Here we go. So you can kind of see them there. Definitely see them there really easily. Okay, look, you can see them in here pretty good. So here you can see these little lines right here on each of these metatarsals. These are all look to be growth plates. Yeah, one major issue, this one has a fracture across the growth plate. That is fractures across the growth plate become a big issue because that's one thing that can actually cause the bone to stop growing whenever you fracture an area that includes the growth plate, and that is not a good thing. So they have to work to fix that if possible. Okay, but that's the epiphyseal plate. So that's what makes the bones grow lengthwise. I mean, it just basically within that little space, we have bone tissue that's being built and elongating the bone. Now, we also have circumferential growth. I can say that. So it has to grow in diameter too, right? Our bones are not the same diameter that they were when we were little babies. And this is something that is constant. Like it breaks down, builds more, breaks down, builds more, and so forth. And then adult bone development says aging causes a loss of bone mass, and that's true. Like all those pores that are in the trabecular bone, those actually like widen and it becomes even more porous. Even more so, we see bone loss in women than we do men. And it has to do with hormones because estrogen plays a factor in how dense women's bones are. And so when women go through menopause, they no longer produce estrogen. It causes a really quick decline in the density of their bones. But yeah, as we get older, we have a progressive decline of collagen, and they just get a lot more brittle, and we have a lot higher risk of fracturing a bone. Okay, remodeling of bones. This is all adult bone tissue is constantly changing, okay? And that's called remodeling. We're not really growing. It's just remodeling. It changes a little bit of shape all the time because our body needs more calcium, so it tears away bone to get calcium, or we've taken a lot of calcium and then it's stored and so forth. So typically, the more activity you do, the stronger your bones are. So whenever you think of osteoporosis, so that's a disease where the bones become really porous and really brittle, weight-bearing exercise is really important because exercise activity that includes weight actually makes your bones stronger and denser. Okay, one issue is swimmers can have is they get all of their exercise in the swimming pool. You don't bear weight in the swimming pool, so that actually decreases the stress to their bones because we don't have that gravity pulling us down all the time. Well, we still have gravity, I guess, but we don't have all that weight. And so, so that's one thing. You know, swimmers could be at an increased risk for fractures. And then atrophy. Hypertrophy, hyper means excessive, and trophy generally means formation. So that's like quick formation, fast formation, more formation, and so forth. Atrophy, A means without. So this is literally without formation of bones, or they weaken. They get really, really weak and maybe narrow, kind of wither away. They say that atrophy occurs really quickly in space because you have no weight. You know, there's no weight bearing at all. So their bones can atrophy really quickly. Side note. Anyways, we'll pick up with the axial skeleton, and I guess that's it for today.